When reactor number 4 exploded at 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, the night sky above northern Ukraine changed forever. But the explosion was only the beginning. The graphite core was exposed. The reactor was open to the air, and an invisible storm had begun to rise, one that could not be seen, smelled, or understood by the human senses. Radiation. Within minutes of the blast, the first emergency calls were placed. Fire alarms rang across the industrial complex. From the nearby city of Pripyat, fire brigades were dispatched. They were told there was a roof fire at the power station. Nothing more. They arrived without protective suits, without radiation meters capable of measuring what awaited them, without any understanding that they were walking into the most contaminated environment on Earth. The firefighters climbed onto the turbine hall roof and the adjacent structures. Burning debris surrounded them. Blocks of graphite, ejected from the reactor core, lay scattered across the rooftop like chunks of coal. Some of the men picked them up with bare hands, unaware that each piece was emitting lethal radiation. They fought the flames the only way they knew how, with hoses, with ladders, with courage. Within hours, many began to feel strange symptoms. A metallic taste in the mouth, nausea, dizziness, severe headaches. These were the early signs of acute radiation syndrome, though few understood what was happening. Some believed it was smoke inhalation. Others thought it was exhaustion. They continued working. By dawn, the fires on the roof were largely extinguished. But the reactor itself was still burning internally, releasing radioactive particles high into the atmosphere. The graphite core continued to smolder, feeding a fire that could not be put out with water. Meanwhile, in Pripyat, life continued. It was a Saturday morning. People prepared for weddings, for fishing trips, for shopping. Children played outside. From certain balconies, residents could see a strange glow above the plant, a blue light flickering in the distance. Some went closer to watch. They did not know that radiation levels in parts of the city were already rising to dangerous levels. The dosimeters available to plant officials were limited. Many maxed out at 3.6 Roentgen per hour, a level that was already considered high. But the true radiation levels near the reactor were thousands of times greater. Inside the control room, confusion reigned. Some engineers insisted the reactor was intact. Others suspected the unthinkable, that the core had been destroyed. But in the Soviet system, hierarchy mattered more than instinct. Reports were filtered. Language was softened. Words like explosion were avoided. In Moscow, early briefings were cautious. No one wanted to believe that a Soviet RBMK reactor, a symbol of technological progress, could fail so catastrophically. But the radiation plume did not respect secrecy. By the morning of April 28th, nearly 48 hours later, elevated radiation levels were detected at a nuclear power plant in Sweden. Workers that were initially suspected of contamination. Only after investigation did it become clear the source was external. The cloud was drifting across Europe. Under mounting international pressure, the Soviet Union finally acknowledged that an accident had occurred at Chernobyl. But details were sparse. The full truth would take years to emerge. Back in Ukraine, evacuation plans were being prepared. It was not until 36 hours after the explosion that buses began arriving in Pripyat. Loudspeakers announced a temporary evacuation. Residents were told to pack essentials for 3 days. They would return soon, officials said. They never did. Nearly 50,000 people left their homes that afternoon. Curtains fluttered in open windows. Toys were left on playgrounds. Dinner plates remained on tables. An entire city was frozen in time. Yet the crisis was far from over. Underneath the destroyed reactor, molten nuclear fuel was burning its way downward. This substance, a mixture of uranium fuel, zirconium cladding, graphite, and concrete, formed a lava-like mass later known as corium. If it reached the water reservoirs beneath the reactor, a massive steam explosion could occur. To prevent this, engineers and soldiers were mobilized on an unprecedented scale. They became known as the Liquidators. Over the following months and years, more than 600,000 military personnel, engineers, miners, firefighters, and volunteers would participate in the cleanup operation. Their tasks were varied and dangerous. Some built a concrete sarcophagus around the destroyed reactor, attempting to contain the radiation. Others decontaminated villages, scraping away topsoil and burying contaminated materials. Helicopter pilots flew directly above the reactor, dropping sand, boron, and lead in an attempt to smother the fire. Many of these missions exposed participants to extreme radiation doses. Robots were sent onto the roof of Reactor 3 to clear radioactive debris, but they failed. The radiation fried their circuits, so humans were sent instead. They were given crude lead aprons and instructed to run onto the roof for no more than 40 seconds. In that time, they were to shovel as much graphite as possible over the edge. 40 seconds. Then they were replaced by the next team. Each run delivered a significant radiation dose. Some liquidators later reported long-term health effects. Others insisted they were fine. The full human cost remains debated, entangled in politics, science, and incomplete records. Meanwhile, the first firefighters were transported to specialized hospitals in Moscow. Their conditions deteriorated rapidly. Radiation destroyed their bone marrow, crippling their immune systems. Skin burns worsened. Internal organs failed. Doctors tried experimental treatments, including bone marrow transplants. Some patients died within days. Their families were often kept at a distance, shielded from the severity of the exposure. Protective measures were inconsistent. The invisible nature of radiation created fear and uncertainty even among medical staff. As weeks passed, the Soviet government began constructing the massive concrete and steel structure around Reactor 4. Built in haste, under intense radiation, the sarcophagus was completed by November 1986. It was not meant to last forever, but it was enough to reduce immediate emissions and stabilize the site. Chernobyl had become a symbol, not only of technological failure, but of systemic weakness. The disaster accelerated political change within the Soviet Union. It fueled demand for transparency under Mikhail Gorbachev's policy of glasnost. It exposed the consequences of secrecy and bureaucratic rigidity. Some historians argue that Chernobyl contributed to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It also transformed nuclear safety worldwide. Reactor designs were re-evaluated. Emergency protocols were rewritten. International cooperation increased. The RBMK design was modified to address its most dangerous flaws, including the positive void coefficient and the graphite-tipped control rods that had contributed to the initial power surge. But for the people of Pripyat, and for many liquidators, these policy changes came too late. The exclusion zone remains in place to this day, a 30-kilometer radius surrounding the plant, where nature has reclaimed abandoned streets and buildings. Wildlife roams through empty schools and apartment blocks. The Ferris wheel in the Pripyat amusement park stands as a rusted monument to a celebration that never happened. In 2016, a new steel arch, the new safe confinement, was slid into place over the original sarcophagus, designed to contain the reactor for another century. Yet the legacy of that night continues. Chernobyl is a reminder that technology, however advanced, is never immune to human error, that systems built on secrecy can magnify disaster, and that courage often emerges not from understanding the danger, but from confronting it unknowingly. The firefighters who climbed the roof believed they were extinguishing a routine blaze. The liquidators who shoveled graphite believed they were protecting their country. The residents of Pripyat believed they would return home in 3 days. None of them knew that they were living through a moment that would redefine nuclear history. Chernobyl was not only an explosion, it was a revelation, an exposure, not just of a reactor core, but of a political and technological system pushed beyond its limits. And in the silence that followed the sirens, in the empty streets of Pripyat, and in the concrete shell surrounding Reactor 4, the world was forced to confront a new reality. The invisible can be more powerful than the visible. The quiet can be more destructive than the loud. And a single night can change the course of history.